All right, welcome to Continual, the con that never ends. And no, I am not Jim Nettles for once, but I play him on TV. I am the one, the only, the R.E. Carr, and I am here to introduce a panel full of amazing guests on horror comedy. Yes, that is not a typo. We are mixing horror and comedy, hopefully to comedic effect. On my panel tonight, I have a lovely assortment of individuals who are now going to introduce themselves, mostly to me because I don't know anyone. Kelley, you're up.
Hi, my name is Kelley M. Frank. I am a horror author and I also make horror art.
That's pretty awesome. How about you, Hansi?
I'm a documentary filmmaker and oral historian, and I'm obsessed with horror. I cosplay horror. I watch horror all the time. Total horror geek.
So you're not a fan. I get it.
Yeah.
How about you, Jay?
Hi, I'm Jay. I'm a podcast producer, audio drama writer, and I write horror comedy and satire. So this is kind of dressed for the occasion.
I am digging that shirt. It is quite fire. And last but certainly not least, Robyn, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Robyn. I am a co-host for a podcast, Diversity Issues, where we talk about diversity in indie comics.
Oh, cool. So we have quite the cast. Let's just start with the low-hanging fruit. We're talking about horror comedy. What's your favorite horror comedy, Kelley?
Oh, geez. There's so many. I made a list in advance and then you asked me and I'm like, oh, no.
Well, of course, I have to get you off
Beetlejuice. Probably Beetlejuice. I love that. It's one of my favorites. I grew up with it. There's a musical. There's a cartoon series. There's going to be another movie. I love it. I'll eat up everything Beetlejuice.
Are you excited for the new, the sequel finally coming out?
I'm more excited for that than The Crow. Yes.
We're talking about horror comedy, not unintentional comedy. So I'm going to ask Hansi what your favorite horror comedy is, just to get the ball rolling.
Who, me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's you.
I'm a huge Evil Dead fan, so Army of Darkness and the Cornetto trilogy. Those are some of my favorite horror comedies.
That's pretty cool. And Jay? Oh, yeah. Jay, it's your turn. I know this question's going to come as a surprise, but what's your favorite horror comedy? I
know. I wear it on my sleeve, but it's a tie between the Ghostbusters series and Evil Dead. I grew up with both of them. Like Beetlejuice, there's a musical for Evil Dead, which is probably a most transformative experience you can enjoy of both genres. But that's mine.
And Robyn?
So I love all of the things that you guys have already mentioned. Grew up on and love Ghostbusters movie and cartoon. Loved Beetlejuice and the cartoon. I'm going to throw something a little different in there. One of my favorite books is a horror comedy book that I did on audiobook. It's called Evil Librarian. And the narrator is spot on. They have this very kind of dry, detached delivery that is just absolutely perfect. It's set in a high school where the librarian is a demon from hell, and one of the students is completely infatuated with this librarian, and the best friend realizes what's going on. The best friend is also the narrator, so it's just absolutely hilarious.
That sounds awesome. As a horror comedy writer here, obviously books are very near and dear to my heart. I have to give a quick shout out to 24/7 Demon Mart by D.M. Guay and Toma Bill by Rick Walteri because, well, they're awesome. And I don't feel like horror comedy books get quite as much love. But I also have to throw in for the Vampire Crew, What We Do in the Shadows, even though that's far more in the comedy side of things. Mm-hmm. But I guess now that we've gotten a grip of what we love, I've heard a lot of Evil Dead. And I wanted to get your opinions on that and the whole trilogy and how it started versus how it ends, because I think it kind of shows off the range of horror comedy and the range of characters that can be in it. So, for those of you that love Evil Dead, if you want to chime in, and we'll start with you, Hansi, what is it about Evil Dead that makes it a pinnacle of both comedy and of horror, in your opinion?
Well, it's written, they're all written so well. I mean, and the relationship and the chemistry between, the Raimis and Bruce Campbell is just, it's something special. It's like Edgar Wright has with, Simon Pegg and Nick Frost and those guys. It's just when those guys are together, they're even funnier. And I'm sure, a lot of it is writing, but I'm sure a lot of it too is just those people having fun together. But yeah, I love all the Evil Dead. I even love the television show. Like the musical is hilarious. And since I cosplay as Ash, like I have done TikToks to just about every song that's related to the musical. Yeah, I mean, there's something in there for everyone. I mean, there's a more scary one. There's the moderately scary one, and then Army of Darkness was just what the fuck is going on? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, we've used it. How about you, Jay? You also said you liked Evil Dead.
Yeah, I like the series. I like how it evolved. I think it realized early on through the midnight shows that it shouldn't take itself too seriously. That first one was a straight horror movie, and when they remade the second one, they realized what their audience wanted, and they knew Bruce Campbell had great comedic chops. They embraced the absurdity of the horror concept that they were trying to embrace when they could have just kept trying to do serious horror. But I think what I learned from the 80s and all of the 99-cent VHS rentals is that the larger the number of the sequel, the dumber and sillier it gets. So even if it's not intending to, the Evil Dead series could have very easily become self-parody, and it just said, you know what, screw it. We're going to play to our strengths, let Bruce get beat up every 5 minutes, and see where it goes. And I love, if you've ever read the biographies by Bruce Campbell, he chronicles all the torture that Sam puts him through physically on every shoot. Shooting water geysers at his face, dangling him over a pit, running his face through glass, injuring him. He just chronicles all the injuries he sustained, and he just goes, that's just working with Sam, man. But the comedy just comes out of that for some weird reason. It just makes it funnier. The bloodier that Bruce Campbell gets, the funnier the movie is. I don't know why that is.
I think that's one of the laws of the internet. The more Bruce Campbell suffers, the more the hilarity happens. How about you, Robyn? Do you have an Evil Dead love moment thing you want to comment about?
I don't have as strong of an attachment to Evil Dead as a lot of people do. I saw it later in life, so I knew of the horror comedy lore of it. And then I saw the first one and I was like, it's kind of campy because, it was because of the time that it was made, but I was like, but this is kind of pretty good horror. So I didn't get it at first. And then I saw the second one and I was like, okay, here we go. This is kind of fun. And, I think Bruce Campbell just sets a great legacy for other horror comedy movies that he's been in. Bubba Hotep was kind of cringe at times, but
I'm from Memphis. So I'm from Memphis, so we all cringe whenever Elvis and horror mix.
Oh, that is such a great film. That's such a beautiful film.
Yeah. And there was another one that he did recently that was set in a mall, and I can't remember the name for the life of me.
Oh yeah, Bruce Campbell.
Yeah.
It was like Black Friday.
Yes, I think that was it.
Was.
Yes.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. I mean, he played the grumpy old boss, but
yeah. I just like Bruce Campbell, so
he can do anything.
How about you, Kelley? So you like Bruce Campbell? What do you think of Evil Dead?
I like Evil Dead. My favorite is Army of Darkness because I want my camp as high as possible. I'm a fan of kind of the wild comedy horrors. Like a lot of people hate Dracula Dead and loving it. I love that movie. It's so ridiculous.
Oh, yeah, we are on opposite ends of that spectrum, but I get where it's coming. It's just not my bag.
I love it. I'm trash. I like I love Reanimator. I can watch that like all the time. It's hilarious. I like the House of a Thousand Corpses trilogy. So over on that end, where it's just
how about Troll 2?
ridiculous. No, not that part. We're not going in that direction.
That is the Troll 2 is the bridge too far. Okay, good to know.
Yes, that is a bridge too far.
That's only funny because it's so bad. That's not.
Yes, it's like that level of fun. Yeah,
that's a different genre.
But I'll sit through Cocaine Bear and Sharknado happily. You know what I mean?
Cocaine Bear was great. I was shocked. It was really, really good.
I'm just like, I'm here for it, you know.
Well, I think you brought up a good point, and that sort of segues to the next question, which is watching how there's just different spectrum. There is a completely different ends of the spectrum on horror comedy. How do you think it's best to balance the horrific and the comedy? Like, what makes it work? And in the counterpoint is, what do you think derails it and ruins horror comedy? And Jay, I'm starting with you.
I think it's which is the first genre in the hyphenate? Is it a comedy first or is it a horror first? And if it's a horror first, you use the comedy to break the tension and set up the next thing. It really comes down to like a good movie like Scream or Eating Raoul. Is one that I was thinking about where it's a dark comedy with a lot of horror, and it's almost like a stew of this is so absurd that it could be both funny or it could be horrific or it could be just so horrific it's funny. And so the balance comes to what are you intending? What do you want your audience to come away with? Rocky Horror Picture Show didn't really know what it was going to be. It meant to be one thing, but it actually transformed into something completely different based on the audience response. So the comedic elements were intentional in most cases, unintentional in some, but it lent itself to actually overwhelm the horror that it was trying to portray based on the old B movie. So it has to know the kind of music it's trying to play for its audience, and it's how do I put this? When you talk about like Ghostbusters, in particular, or Evil Dead, it knows it's got to shock you to every beat. There's got to be a beat every few minutes to make you laugh and make you cringe, and one can be used to deflect to the other. It can set you up to laugh and then with a jump scare, or it can do the reverse. So I think it really needs to come back to: are you first a comedy or are you first a horror movie?
Yeah, because there are like John Carpenter films that are horror films, but there are comedic moments, like in The Thing, when they're like, what the hell is,
Yeah. Like, I mean, you can watch American Psycho as a comedy, or you can watch it as a horror. It just depends on how many times you've seen it.
and it can be a bit of both, especially if you're into stationary porn.
Mm-hmm.
But how about you? How about you, Robyn? What do you feel like? How do you make comedy and horror work, and how does it not work?
Kind of piggybacking off of what Jay was saying, I kind of personally prefer the ones that lean further into the comedy and almost like makes fun of horror in some regards. I really enjoyed those. There's a short that my sister showed me it's on YouTube, so you can watch it for free. It's called Finley, and it is hilarious. It is about a doll that comes to life. This group of people move into a house, and there's this creepy doll in the attic, and he tries to murder everyone, but he can't manage to get it right. And he tries to poison everyone, but he accidentally leaves the box on the counter so they know what's happening. He tries to leave the nails out, but he puts them like face down instead of face. It's like this just goofy stuff, and it's just so funny and hilarious. So at times I feel like when when it's the horror elements are kind of like over the top, when like the blood sprays are just like almost kind of like a water hose, like that
Like
can't be
anime
real.
blood.
Right,
Well,
Yeah.
exactly. When it's
Yeah.
just over the top and they're kind of playing with that, those are kind of my favorites.
Gore
Yeah.
fest, me too. When the gore just gets to the point where it's just ridiculous, like in
Yeah.
Bad Taste or Brain Dead or Dead Alive.
Dead
Yeah.
Alive, yeah.
Like he's killing the zombies with the lawnmower.
Yeah. I mean, I've been
Yeah.
enjoying Has Been Hotel lately, and it's hilarious.
Oh,
but
we
I mean,
could-
I've been looking at
it
that.
would
That's
totally
good.
creep people out, though. So
we could totally just go on an entire Has-Been Hotel tangent.
Mhm. But it's right
well-
in there with comedy horror.
Well, it's true. Well, since it's your turn now, Kelley, what would you like? How do you balance comedy and horror? How do you do it right and how do you do it wrong?
I feel like I'm terrible at that because things that I find funny are things that like, and there's also like certain things in like the horror genre that people just enjoy. So like I'll watch like a Jason movie like Jason 3 or Jason Takes Manhattan or whatever, and I'll be laughing the whole way through. But if I have friends over that aren't into horror, they're like, "What the heck? Why are you this is horrible," you know? So I think there's like I think kind of figuring out who your audience is going to be. Like I mentioned Sharknado before, that movie is hilarious, but it had to find its audience. You know what I mean? If that was a movie you had to like go into a theater and pay to see an IMAX, it would not be its audience. But on
Especially
demand, you can just pull it up and watch it. Yeah, it's perfect. I'm not expecting amazing like budget or anything like that. It's just goofy. I think like, I think of like Tremors is like a really good comedy horror, but it's also like there's genuinely terrifying scenes, like the man who climbs up on top of the electrical pole to try to get away from the tremors and can't, there's things like that. But there's a lot of comedy in that. Ghostbusters. I loved Ghostbusters when I was a kid, but there were some scenes when I was a kid that genuinely scared me.
The librarian?
The librarian. It's always the librarian.
Yeah.
And a lot of the more adult jokes go over your head when you're a kid, you know what I mean? So you're just like, this is really cool. And it's funny occasionally. It's funnier now as an adult than it was when I was a kid. So I think it just depends on like finding your audience and figuring out like how far you can push it and what they're interested in. Like the more gore you add, the more like that's going to turn it into an adults only audience. But if you stick it more like fantasy violence, I guess, like the look of the librarian and stuff like that, you don't see a whole lot of I'm thinking of when Tully gets attacked by the demon dog in Ghostbusters. You don't actually see it attacking him. He just sinks down and then everyone goes back to eating their food because they don't care. So it breaks that tension with humor, and then we don't see like the horror of that as much. And so I think that makes it easier for like a younger audience to access, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, I think it does. And how about you, Hansi? How do you think, like, how do you balance horror and comedy? What makes it great? What makes it not so great?
Well, I have a really twisted sense of humor. So like I would consider The Walking Dead a comedy. So
I considered Saw a laugh out loud comedy and got nothing but death stares in the theater. So I'm not judging much.
like I enjoy the splatter and the thing because I know how it's done. It doesn't, it's not. I find horror like funny because it's so predictable. It's not like life,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So when they take it to the, the nth degree, then that really works for me. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, I can get that. And I said, so we've gotten it, and the question that's coming, because you can't have a comedy or probably a horror panel without the question, the dreaded question. Everyone, take a deep breath, clench if you need to, and I'm starting with you, Robyn. So we're talking about comedy and horror. What can't you joke about? Like, what is too far in horror comedy? Enjoy, Robyn. You get the hardball question to start.
So, I was actually just thinking about this when I was like making my list of stuff to talk about.
Oh, yeah, you knew it was coming. It's on the like manifesto. It's required.
I would prefer if comedy didn't lean into punching down. And that's comedy across the board. I do enjoy because one of the ones that's on my list is Scream Queens. I remember watching it when it first came out, and it was hilarious. And I just recently rewatched it for this panel so that it will be fresh in my mind. And with it being satire, I think it still generally holds up. But you can really tell that a lot of the jokes were made as a reflection of the time that it was created. So, and that's not to say that it still isn't like a quality piece of work that was really important for when it came out. But I think that one of the things that allows comedy to be more timeless is if it doesn't punch down. And of course, we have more sensibilities and understandings now to when that actually is occurring. I think a lot of times when pieces were made before, people didn't understand that that was what was happening and that that was what they were doing. So I generally prefer, so when it's satire, I can take it for what it is, or what it was for the piece that it was at the time that it was created. But I really enjoy pieces that make fun of the horror genre itself, because those kind of elements for me are going to be kind of timeless. Like the one I was telling you guys about Finley, it makes fun of, the animated puppet trope. It does do a few things that are kind of like, really, guys? But the main point is it making fun of the horror genre. Oh, and sorry to talk so long, but another one.
No, I want to hear this.
There was another one too that I rewatched, Hot Fuzz.
Cornetto
Triplicate came out.
Yeah.
Yes. I loved that when it came out. And when I was rewatching it, they lean into a lot of kind of sexist and homophobic jokes, but those jokes aren't really necessary to the plot of the movie. The plot itself makes fun of it makes fun of the situation that the main character finds himself in, and it takes the horror elements and makes them kind of overblown and over the top. So just using that, like that core part of it, it still holds up really well. Like you can take those kind of like sexist and homophobic jokes out of the movie and still have a really strong quality movie that just has the horror comedy elements that would still hold up today. So yeah.
I mean, those are amazing points. Guess what, Kelley? It's your turn to take the loaded question. What's the joke?
I was hoping for that because like I was gonna piggyback off that completely because so when I get interested in like a character or something, I go down a little hyperfixation rabbit hole. So like I got really interested in like the philosophy and nature of comedy for a while, and there's all those like things of like the fine line between comedy and horror is that when the person falls down the stairs, they get back up again. That kind of a thing. But it's also this idea of like punching down is oppression, but comedy itself exists to critique the social structure. So if you're punching down, then you're more of a tool of the social hierarchy, whereas if you're punching up, then you're critiquing it. So it's not really comedy if it's punching down. You're just being a tool, basically.
That is, I mean, that's interesting, in terms of sociology, that like both like horror and comedy are kind of like outsider genres, like they're, and that they merge so well that adrenaline of fear and that sense of humor can somehow be linked.
Yeah. And it's really an interesting thing because like I was hyper fixated on the Joker for a while, so that idea of like comedy and fear.
I cosplay the Joker.
Yeah. But it's that idea of like, this nature of like they're very similar and you get kind of a similar reaction. It's just you have the catharsis afterwards. Whereas horror just doesn't give you that catharsis, so it keeps that tension high. I just think that's exactly what you were saying, Robin. It's that exact same thing. I rewatched. This is not a horror movie, but I rewatched Ace Ventura: Pet Detective recently, and it was way worse than I'd ever thought. Like it was awful, and I had like sort of fond memories of it, but rewatching it, I was like the whole thing is like it circles around like being transphobic, and it's just really like it's creepy. I hadn't seen that since I was like a child.
It revenged of the nerds you, didn't it?
Oh yeah, and it's just like ew, gross. You know what I mean? So
it's so disappointing.
That's what happens when you get on a Jim Carrey kick. There's like some hits, but a lot of misses. You know what I mean?
Just hold on to the Truman Show and Eternal Sunshine. It's okay.
Yeah.
They will carry you on.
Yeah, basically. But yeah, it's just that kind of humor doesn't age well. Whereas I can go back and rewatch like Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton, and it still holds up. And so I think like it just depends on what's your goal here? Are you bandwagoning or are you trying to like critique something? So
okay, Hansi, how would you like to add to the question?
Well, because I was sort of going off of what I started to say earlier. It's like both horror and comedy like are based on the social mores and what's funny and what was funny 5 years ago can sound terrible today. I watch a lot of old stuff and you're like cringing because like you're like oh my god, how could that possibly have been okay in any way? But I think both horror and comedy try to like show society what's wrong, so that might be why they work together so well, because if you're doing it right, I mean sometimes it's just a ride, but
yeah.
And Jay, are you ready? You've had plenty of time. Jump in the ring.
Head start. Comedy.
What's the joke too far?
Comedy and horror are great vehicles for satire and social commentary when used properly. I grew up in the 80s, and a lot of those comedies and a lot of those horror movies do not hold up because they're about personality politics. They're about the failings of individuals and types of people. The best non-horror example of that is The Breakfast Club. The Breakfast Club can be transplanted into a horror movie because you got your archetypes. You don't have the burden of character development. You just put a type in there and start killing them off based on whatever moral perspective you have. And comedy's the same kind of way. The Revenge of the Nerds analogy is perfect because you set up a bunch of stereotypes, and the comedy is in how far away from normative they are. And they have some redeeming qualities, but essentially the comedy is at their expense. And the best type of comedies are the types that endure, like the Marx Brothers. The best type of horror is the kind of commentary like Night of the Living Dead. And those are social politics. That's racial politics. It's gender politics. And those genres work because they're not hitting you over the head with the message so much as we're going to take all of those relevant factors out for a moment and put it through a lens that you're not so biased about. We're not talking about racial issues. We're talking about human issues, which was really what we should be focusing on. What you can't do is, as Robin put so well, is punching down. That's the one thing that puts a countdown clock on your art. As soon as you decide that you're going to be cruel to somebody, you got to know that in 5 years you're going to look like an ass. Because in anything that you rent that's probably prior to the year 2000, especially genre media, is problematic in some way. The one thing from my generation X on, we started to film ourselves, and we document our everyday actions. Film is the same way, but we're now documenting our failings and our lack of progressiveness in how we record ourselves on a daily basis. Media's been doing that for decades. We could look back at horror from the 50s and 60s, and were our parents really like that? Did our grandparents really think that way? Oh my God. And like Bucky Fuller used to say, a liberal could become a conservative within 20 years without changing a single thought. And that's basically because the world around you continues to change when somebody like me at 50 just stops. And it's like, this is the world as I want it. I don't want to change anymore. And then we look back at the media and we find the things eventually that we don't want to say. What can't be done now is probably, things I could have done 10 years ago, like making fun of a crime, making fun of physical abuse, that mental abuse, the differently abled. Those were things that you could get away with. And I don't necessarily subscribe to what George Carlin said, that you can make fun of everything. There's an audience for it. If you go on any social media board, you will find somebody who finds anything horror, or any horror or any comedy, just the best that they've ever experienced.
And I do agree. I mean, I think that punching down is absolutely wrong, but there is a certain merit to punching up, the kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So yes, I do think that anything can be funny, but it depends on the source and the trajectory. Because I absolutely think if it's your own experience and you are mocking yourself, you're allowed. And I think everyone is allowed. Mm-hmm. That's very important, I think, because you do need to be able to punch up. But absolutely, when you start taking cheap shots and, as we said, the revenge of the nerds syndrome hits and you go, oh my God, did I really laugh at that? Yeah. I guess the best part is, as long as you're saying, oh my God, did I laugh at that? You're probably doing something right. Unless anyone's invented a time machine. If that case, then you can go back.
And humans don't stay like static, we evolve. We're supposed to grow and change over time. And hopefully our society grows and changes and gets better over time. And so we want our media to reflect that. So, I mean, it's good to recognize that, but my God, it is an uncomfortable experience to go back and be like, ooh.
Oh. But speaking of uncomfortable experiences, we talked about comedy going too far. Hansi, I'm going to start with you. Is there horror that can go too far that ruins and makes a comedy instantly unfunny? And I'm just picking you first because Lord knows you seem to have the wickedest sense of humor of all of us.
I don't like for the most part, like torture porn kind of stuff.
Not an Eli Roth fan?
Actually, I really liked his last film. I thought that was great. And no, generally I'm not. But his last film, what was it the mall one? What was it? Yeah, it was it was great. But I'd like to see. I'd rather like rollicking, like
over the top.
Yes, over the top stuff, like where it's just ridiculous. Like the blood just keep, like Monty Python. That kind of like
anime font. We got it.
Yeah, like I'm fine. Come back. I'll take your head off.
How about you, Jay? Is there a horror that's too far that can make it impossible to have comedy?
Again, it's subjective. It really depends on your audience and what your type of horror is. There's very graphic horror where people expect the faces of death type of exploitative gore, and it's completely humorless to them, but it satisfies a need. It's to scare them or shift some of their reality into a different perspective. To me, if it gets too serious, then what's the point? If it's nihilistic, then there's really no entertainment value for me. There's no message. The thing about Lovecraft, for me, is, okay, I get it. Everybody dies. Everybody goes mad. That's cheerful stuff. But what's the beyond the poetry? What's the value of it? And I'm not saying that's true of all of Lovecraft's work, but the reason I guess I like Ghostbusters is because there's hope. There is, even if they're insurmountable elder gods coming down on your city, you're not going to take that shit, and you're not going to let a ghost step on churches in your town. You're going to take them out sometime.
With giant marshmallows.
Yes. That's the whole point of horror in some cases, is to is to shine a light on real world problems, so that in some cases your real world doesn't look so bad, but it also gives you inspiration to deal with your own relatively insignificant problems in a better way. That to me is what you can do. When you get beyond that, when you get into the I'm going to start beating you down, or with horror where it's cruelty, or again, like I said before, with identity politics, I think that it's not too it's too far from me. But again, everyone on this panel has a different line in the sand as to what's acceptable and not.
Yeah.
And I think that line will move as we get older and experience more things.
Yeah, no one's going for Auschwitz the musical here.
No. Unless it's Mel Brooks.
He's about the only one who I think might be able to pull that off. And even I would call that a long shot. But I'm very curious about Robyn. What about for you? What horror would be too far and trash comedy for you?
I can't remember who said it, but one of the other panelists said a little bit earlier, if the person doesn't get back up. I'm kind of
Kelley.
see torture porn is a little too far. If someone is suffering, I mean, I understand that it's supposed to be horror, but again, for me personally, I like the ones that lean into making fun of the genre itself. Anything that relies on someone else's misery for laughs, to me, that's the line in the sand too far.
Okay. And Kelley, how about you? What horror is too horror?
I am gonna say that for me personally, I've gotten very tired of just like sexual assault in movies.
Oh, the Game of Thrones special edition. It's
not even just that. It's like, I don't know. When I watch, I really like Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses trilogy. I enjoy it. But there are sexual assault scenes. There's a particular one with a pistol. And it's very uncomfortable. There's a lot of stuff like I feel like it's a lazy way to terrorize female characters or male characters. It's just lazy. There's so many other ways. I'm cool with torture. I'm cool with Patrick Bateman running down the hall naked with a chainsaw. That's totally fine by me. But I'm just like, we've got enough sexual assault in the world. Can't you be more creative? You know, tear off a finger or something. Be more interesting.
The way the directors shoot it, like the Sosta sisters in American Mary. That way, you just see her face. You never see him on top of her. You never see below, and you just know what's going on her face, but you don't have to go through that whole thing.
Yeah, but that's the point where I just check out, because I'm just like, I don't know, man. This has been like done to death in movies, and I think like movies have done it better, and it starts to feel like it's like a snuff film almost, like they're trying to make one, and I'm just like, it's just not. I don't know. That's my personal thing. I just get bored with it. There was a horror movie that came out, and I can't remember what it's called, but it was the one where the people tried to burgle this guy's house, and he was like hunting them down, and he was blind, and he was, you know what I mean?
Irredeemable, and then they made him good in the second movie, like as an anti-hero.
The end of that first movie. Yeah, I was just like not ready for that weird ending of the first movie. And I was just like, man. And I went to go see it, and I mean, I'm not always one that advocates for trigger warnings, but I was there with a friend who was a survivor of a sexual assault, and I was just like, I'm so sorry.
Even worse, I was watching it on a plane, and there were no warnings.
Ooh,
and the turkey baster scene, the woman next to drilled everything between us.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that was coming.
No, I mean, it's not like that's what the movie's about. The movie's about people being stalked in a house who shouldn't have broken in, which seems like an interesting revenge fantasy horror thing. And then it turns into that, and it was just, it wasn't like, it didn't make me scared. It made me angry and just annoyed, and just, it felt lazy. And I was like, of course, this is what you're going to do with the female character. Why did I think anything different? And it just makes me judge the director and avoid them in the future. And I know that's probably not very fair, but that's just,
Everything's
I
fair
feedback
in
like that
horror and comedy.
from somebody. I wrote the one scene that I regret writing for an audio drama series involved that, and I thought, and I worked with other people to see if I could handle it the right way. But that is such a delicate and detailed
It is.
try and cover, and it falls flat because it's never you can cover it right if there is a possible way.
Yeah.
I wish I could go back and just redo it and get rid of it. I would probably edit out a different edition. But yeah, I agree with you, Kelley.
It's just rough. And I feel like there's so many more creative ways of torturing people. Like there's really interesting, like if you want to do a torture scene, like
I mean, your soundbite about through
you,
the essay, take off a finger is pretty.
Yeah. Take off a finger, tear off their face. There's amazing ways you can torture people. Take out each tooth one at a time.
Well,
I'll be here for that, but the essay is just too far. You know what I mean? That's just me. That's just me personally.
So
it just feels
Sam
lazy.
Raimi has said that if he could, they would have taken the tree rape out.
Yeah, I heard that, and I was just like, yeah, because it doesn't feel like it belongs in the movie. It doesn't.
And yet they did a
I
version
don't
of
have
that in
a
the
problem
remake.
with the movie, but I understand like why he would want to take it out at this point.
Yeah. Well, I can't show that to my friends who have been victims of SA because they can't deal with that. So that means that there's a huge swath of horror and 80s movies that I just can't show them. And that's depressing. You know what I mean? So it's just, I don't know.
But you are awesome for thinking of them, so appreciate it.
I mean, it's just that's a decent human thing to do.
Well, we've had enough talk about decent human beings, but I did want to circle back as we start winding things down to something that was mentioned earlier about how horror and comedy are they're the goth kids and the theater kids sitting at the edge of the high school. Mm-hmm. They're not exactly cool, and they're kind of making fun of everyone else, but most people are either scared or laugh at them. So what do you think it's going to take to make horror and comedy become like superhero movies and be everywhere and oversaturated? Like, what do you think it would take to bring those both into the mainstream together? Jay?
That doesn't sound good to me.
And if it doesn't sound good, why?
Well, I think genre fiction is good in outside the mainstream. It's at its best when it's creative and it's innovative and it has the freedom to appeal to a new audience as opposed to a mainstream audience that wants more of the same crap and just in a slightly different way. Mm-hmm. I mean, something like Ghostbusters has become more a science fiction thing than comedy or horror. Yeah. The new movie that came out, I'm on a number of different social media boards, but they are arguing about the scientific integrity of ghostbusting now. And I grew up with this as like the product of Saturday Night Live and Second City and comedy. Mm-hmm. And then Dan Aykroyd's spiritualist roots and his connections to horror. That's all. Yeah. Once that became mainstream and a cartoon, it lost its value. So I don't know if I want it to become popular. I'd like to keep it like my dirty secret.
I was really surprised that like Trauma actually, like Toxie, they sold like Toxie costumes to kids for a while, and like they had like a game. So like somehow the Toxic Avenger managed to cross comedy and horror somehow.
When Freddy started rapping, that was the end of that.
Oh dear. Oh, yeah. Now that's just pure horror. That's not even comedy horror.
Yeah.
How about you, Robyn? What do you think about our lovely little redheaded stepchildren genres? Do you want them to be more popular? Do you think there is a way for them to become mainstream, or would you even want that?
I think it kind of depends. I do appreciate Jay's point of what you were saying about, certain parts of the genre speak to people for different reasons, especially when it gets satirical, when you have different pockets of people and that satire kind of like speaks to their experience. Mm-hmm. Like for instance, like American Carnage speaks a lot to the Latina experience, The Blackening that just came out speaks a lot to like the Black experience, and other people can enjoy it, but certain things, like Jay was saying, when you try too hard to have an overarching appeal, you're going to lose the elements that make it unique in that way, especially horror comedy that leans into satire. Now, if the satire can be done in a way like we were talking about before, and like you were talking about, where a specific group kind of focuses on their experiences, and doesn't rely on like punching at other groups in order to kind of make their point, it's still going to have that niche audience, because once you try to be too mainstream, then you're going to lose the potency of the message that you were trying to get across. So I do kind of agree with Jay's point that horror comedy that has a certain thing that it's trying to say, with like if they're trying to say certain things with their art, then they need to have the freedom to be able to do that without trying to have a mass appeal.
Well, Kelley, what about you? What do you feel about the niche genres, and should they be bigger or should they stay in their little holes?
I don't know. I feel like it's already not really as niche as we think it is. Like Beetlejuice has a musical on Broadway and it's getting a sequel all these years later.
I guess Tim Burton kind of spreads a wide net.
Well, he did, but it's also like, I mean, Happy Death Day was in theaters. Renfield just came out, and that's a horror comedy that did pretty well. There's a lot of stuff like that that's been like out, and I think like, I mean, Hazbin Hotel we talked about, and that's killing it on Amazon right now, just killing it. And so I think that I think it's important for some things to appeal to a more general audience, because it introduces them to the genre and lets them know that there is a place in horror for more than just like Hostel and Saw, because a lot of people, that's what they still primarily think of. Or like really slow burn horrors. A lot of people, like, they don't want to take time for that, and they don't want jump scares. And I think like introducing them to this, that it all doesn't have to be gloom and doom or gore fest, is interesting and good, you know, because I think it's important that we keep having more voices in the horror community and not shut people out and become like this little gated community. But I also think that like, if understanding your audience is good, and just sometimes just making stuff for other horror fans to laugh at, like, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that, you know, just don't try and you'll be cool. That's always been the key to being cool, is just don't try so hard to be cool, and it'll just come naturally, you know?
Yes. I should have learned that in high school, but I never did. How about you, Hansi? What do you think about our little genres? Do you think they should be bigger? Should stay in their lanes? What do you think?
I'm perfectly happy to have niche media. You know, I'm much more interested in subcultures than overall, you know, middle of the road pop culture. And what I've been doing this past year, because I haven't been able to work on my own films, has been, I've been investing in and helping out all these indie horror comedies on Kickstarter. New Fear's Eve, Skaters from Hell, another one by Cindy Sanbria. I mean, a whole bunch of them, and like, you know, assistant producer, that whatever I can do to help them out. And yeah, I think the niche thing is where I'm happier. So, you know, I mean, I'm sure the studios with like,
they always want the next Avengers. Yeah. But I guess it's time for us to assemble, because no panel would be complete without everyone's favorite minigame, shameless self-promotion. So I would love for everyone to say who you are, where people can find you, and if you have anything new to plug, make it quick. Kelley?
My name is Kelley M. Frank. You can find me at morbidsmile.com. I do art commissions and in-person shows, and I have a shop where I sell creepy stuff, including my writing.
Hansi?
I'm Hansi Oppenheimer. My company is Squee Projects, and I've been documenting fandom for over 20 years. And you can find me at Squee Projects pretty much everywhere: TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, etc.
Jay, please pimp thyself.
Jay Smith.
You're going to need a bigger hat.
We found at the corner of Moon Street and Gale most nights. Most of my stuff is at jsmithaudio.com. There are hours and hours of free downloadable full cast audio drama entertainment. And if you like that stuff, you can buy my books too.
Oh,
Cool. Robyn?
You can get our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. It's Diversity Issues, and our website is diversityissues.libsyn.com, LIBSYN.
That is so awesome. And I have been your giddy first-time moderator, the one, the only, the R.E. Carr. You can find me at racheleccarr.com because Rachel Carr wrote vegan cookbooks, and that is not me. Or if you want to find me on socials, I am at Total Recar, and I have written a few horror comedy books, which my latest, The Accidental Summoner, is available from Falstaff Press. I want to thank my amazing panel for making me look good, and also the staff at Continual, the con that never ends. This has been Horror Comedy, and I hope you've had a good, scary laugh. Bye!